Imagine being told your lung cancer has spread and, that your options might be limited. For years, that's been a really tough reality for so many people facing that
It
diagnosis.
really has. A very challenging situation.
But what if a new therapy could do more than just extend lives? What if it could actually double the chance of survival at 4 years? Even for those patients who've, well, historically had the toughest fight.
That's exactly the kind of potential we're seeing here.
That's the story, really, we're diving into today. We're looking at these profound 4-year outcomes from the Gemstone 302 trial. It's about metastatic non-small cell lung cancer, or NSCLC, and the study was just published in Lancet Oncology.
Exactly. And our mission today, you could say, is to really distill the long-term impact of this specific therapy, Sugemalimab.
Mm.
What do these findings actually mean for patients, especially, as you said, for those with forms of lung cancer that have traditionally been very, very difficult to treat?
Okay, so let's set the stage a bit for our listeners. What exactly is metastatic non-small cell lung cancer? Why is it still such a huge global health challenge?
Right. So metastatic NSCLC, it means the cancer cells, the non-small cells, have spread. They've gone beyond the lungs to other parts of the body.
Okay.
And it's a massive global challenge simply because it's the most common type of lung cancer. It accounts for the vast majority of cases, and unfortunately, it's often diagnosed quite late.
Which makes it harder to treat effectively, I assume.
Precisely, much harder. Now, the current standard approach for advanced NSCLC usually involves a combination: immune checkpoint inhibitors plus chemotherapy.
That's become pretty standard first-line treatment now, hasn't it?
It has, yes. But even with these advances, the source material, this study, it really highlights that there are still persistent challenges, big ones.
Like what specifically?
Well, for certain patient groups, long-term survival just remains stubbornly low, suboptimal. We're talking about patients with very low PD-L1 expression.
That's the biomarker that helps immune cells find the cancer, or rather, helps the cancer hide.
Exactly, helps it hide. So low expression means immunotherapy might not work as well, theoretically.
Mm.
Also, patients with what's called squamous histology, a specific type of lung cancer growth,
Okay.
and even patients who have brain metastases right at the start, they've faced really limited long-term options. So these are precisely the difficult-to-treat groups that this drug, Sugemalimab, is aiming to help.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The Gemstone 302 trial, it sounds like a really important piece of research. What about its design? Did anything make it particularly suited to looking at these challenging patient groups?
Great question. So Gemstone 302 is a phase 3 trial, double-blind, randomized. That's really the gold standard for clinical evidence.
Right.
It was run across 35 hospitals and academic research centers, all located in China.
Okay. And the patients?
The patient population was quite specific. 479 patients overall, split into two groups. 320 got Sugemalimab, 109 got placebo.
And their conditions?
Right, they were aged 18 to 75. All had stage 5 NSCLC confirmed,
Right.
histologically or cytologically. And importantly, they were treatment naive.
Meaning they hadn't had prior treatment for their metastatic disease?
Exactly. First-line treatment. Crucially, they didn't have known sensitizing genomic alterations like EGFR, ALK, ROS1, or RET mutations, which have their own targeted therapies.
Got it.
And here's a really key part, especially for those subgroups. Eligibility was independent of their PD-L1 expression levels. They didn't screen patients out based on low PD-L1.
Ah, okay. That is important.
And also really vital, the trial specifically included patients with untreated asymptomatic or stable brain metastases. That's a group often left out of these kinds of studies.
That's a huge point. And you mentioned they were all Asian patients in this particular study.
Yes, that's correct. All patients in this trial were Asian.
So how are the two treatment arms actually structured? What did they receive?
Okay, so one arm got Sugemalimab, that's the PD-L1 inhibitor we're talking about,
Yeah.
plus standard platinum-based chemotherapy.
The combo arm?
Right. The other arm got a placebo, so an inactive substance, plus the same platinum-based chemotherapy.
Okay, the control arm. And how long did treatment go on?
They received up to 4 cycles of that combination therapy initially. Then they moved on to maintenance therapy, either Sugemalimab or placebo alone, for up to 35 cycles.
Wow, 35 cycles. That's quite a long maintenance period.
It is. Or until, the disease progressed or the side effects became unacceptable. But that long maintenance is really key to understanding these impressive long-term outcomes we're about to discuss.
All right, foundation laid. Let's get right to it. The headline results. 4 years of follow-up data. That's pretty rare for these kinds of inhibitors, isn't it? So what did this long view actually show?
It really is quite rare to have such mature data. And the results are, well, compelling. Let's start with overall survival, or OS. The median OS was 25.2 months in the Sugemalimab group.
Okay.
Compare that to 16.9 months in the placebo group.
So about an 8-month improvement in the median, half the patients living at least 8 months longer.
Precisely. That's a significant extension right there. But here's where it gets, I think, really striking. The 4-year overall survival rate.
Bro, what percentage were alive at 4 years?
In the Sugemalimab group, it was 32.1%.
Okay, nearly a third. And the placebo group.
Only 17.3%.
Wow, it's nearly double.
Nearly double the number of patients alive at 4 years. And progression-free survival, PFS, also showed really clear benefits. The median PFS was 9.0 months with Sugemalimab versus just 4.9 months with placebo.
Another big difference.
And the 4-year PFS rate, it was 12.4% with Sugemalimab. For the placebo group, it wasn't even estimable.
Not estimable,
Meaning progression happened so frequently or early in that group that calculating a meaningful 4-year rate wasn't really possible from the data.
Just think about that for a moment. For every 100 patients starting treatment, nearly twice as many are alive 4 years later with Sugemalimab plus chemo compared to chemo alone. That's not just a number. That's potentially years more life.
Absolutely. And that contrast, especially with the progression-free survival, really underscores the impact this treatment can have over the long term.
Now, what I found particularly compelling, digging into this, was how it performed in those specific challenging patient subgroups you mentioned earlier. Did the benefits hold up there?
Yes, and this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The consistency of the benefit across these historically difficult-to-treat subgroups is really vital. It addresses major unmet needs.
So like the low PD-L1 group.
Exactly. For patients with PD-L1 expression less than 1%, who, as we said, are often considered less responsive, the 4-year overall survival rate was 23.2% in the Sugemalimab group versus 16.6% in the placebo group.
Still a noticeable improvement for a group with limited options.
A definite improvement, yes. Then for squamous NSCLC patients, the 4-year OS rate was 27.6% with Sugemalimab versus only 11.7% with placebo.
Big difference there.
Huge difference. And in non-squamous NSCLC, the rates were 35.5% with Sugemalimab versus 20.2% with placebo.
Still a very substantial benefit.
Absolutely. And perhaps one of the most impactful findings was for those patients who started with brain metastases.
Right, a really tough situation.
Extremely tough. This group saw a median overall survival of 26.0 months with Sugemalimab. Compare that to just 9.0 months with placebo.
Wow, more than doubling the median survival.
And the 4-year OS rate in this brain mets group was 36.4% in the Sugemalimab group. Again, it wasn't estimable for the placebo group.
So a really significant benefit for a population where, honestly, options have often been quite dire.
Truly significant. It shows this therapy isn't just working for the easier cases, if you can even say that about metastatic cancer. It's making a difference in the really tough ones, too.
That's quite a breakthrough, isn't it? It really highlights how this therapy is tackling some of the biggest hurdles in NSCLC treatment, offering real hope.
And what's fascinating here, potentially contributing to these durable benefits, is Sugemalimab's unique profile. It's a bit different from some other PD-L1 antibodies.
How so?
Well, unlike some others, it retains its ability to bind to something called the F-core receptor I. Now, this sounds technical, but what it might allow it to do is basically help immune cells, called macrophages, recognize and engulf the PD-L1 positive tumor cells more effectively. It's called antibody-dependent cellular phagocytosis.
So it kind of flags the cancer cells more effectively for the immune system's cleanup crew.
That's a good way to put it. It might provide an extra mechanism for attacking the cancer, possibly contributing to why the effects seem so long-lasting in some patients.
And does that show up in the response rates?
It certainly seems to. The overall objective response rate, the percentage of patients whose tumors shrank significantly, was 63% in the Sugemalimab group. That's compared to 40% in the placebo group.
Okay, higher response rate.
And the duration of that response was also much longer. The median was 9.9 months with Sugemalimab versus only 4.4 months with placebo. So responses were more common and they lasted longer.
And you mentioned long-lasting benefits. There was this really fascinating subset of patients in the trial, wasn't there? The ones treated for over 2 years.
Yes, this is really remarkable. There were 58 patients in the Sugemalimab group who stayed on treatment for over 2 years.
And what did their outcomes look like? This seems like it could really show the potential for prolonged benefit.
It's quite astounding, actually. This group of long-term responders, they had an objective response rate of 93.1%.
93%.
Incredible. And their 4-year overall survival rate, an astonishing 92.6%.
Almost everyone in that group still alive at 4 years.
Exactly. It really reinforces the potential for very deep, very prolonged benefits with this treatment for at least a subset of patients. It hints at a truly transformative impact for some individuals.
Of course, whenever we talk about powerful treatments like this, especially long-term ones, safety and tolerability become absolutely critical. What did the safety story look like for Sugemalimab over these 4 years? Was it generally well tolerated?
That's always the crucial balance, isn't it? Efficacy versus safety. The good news is the safety profile remained pretty consistent with what was seen in earlier reports from this trial.
So no new major safety concerns popped up with the longer follow-up?
No new safety signals emerged, and importantly, no additional treatment-related deaths were observed during this extended follow-up period.
That's reassuring. What about the more common or serious side effects?
Okay, looking at the grade 3 or 4 treatment-related adverse events, those are the more severe ones. The most common were things we often see with chemo combos. Decreased neutrophil count was about 33% in both groups.
Similar between the arms, then?
Yes. Decreased white blood cell count was 15% with Sugemalimab versus 17% with placebo, and anemia was 14% versus 11%. So broadly similar in terms of those common chemo-related toxicities.
What about serious adverse events?
Treatment-related serious adverse events occurred in 26% of the Sugemalimab patients and 20% of the placebo patients. So slightly higher in the Sugemalimab arm, but not dramatically so.
And immune-related side effects. Those are always a focus with checkpoint inhibitors.
Right, and this is a key point. The incidence of grade 3, or higher immune-related adverse events, the severe ones, was actually quite low, only 5% in the Sugemalimab group.
Only 5%. That does seem relatively low compared to some immunotherapy regimens.
It does, and the source, the paper, suggests this relatively low rate of severe immune toxicity might actually be a factor in allowing patients to stay on treatment longer and achieve those durable survival benefits. It points towards a potentially favorable balance, getting strong efficacy without overwhelming immune side effects for most patients.
And that balance, that's the goal, isn't it? Effective treatment that people can actually tolerate long enough to benefit from. It's not just about adding months, but the quality of those months.
Absolutely critical.
So zooming out a bit, what does this all mean in the bigger picture? How do these Gemstone 302 findings position Sugemalimab now within the whole landscape of NSCLC treatments?
Well, if you put these 4-year overall survival rates side by side with other major trials.
Like the Keynote trials.
Exactly. Trials like Keynote 189 for non-squamous, Keynote 407 for squamous, which established pembrolizumab plus chemo. Sugemalimab's results compare quite favorably.
Okay.
But it even holds up well when you compare it to some of the dual immunotherapy approaches, like the Poseidon trial or Checkmate 9LA, especially, again, in those challenging subgroups we keep coming back to.
The low PD-L1 expressors or those with brain mets.
Precisely. The benefit there seems particularly strong relative to some other options.
And the study itself had a unique aspect, didn't it, covering both types of NSCLC?
Yes, that's another significant point. The authors highlight that Gemstone 302 is, as far as they know, the first randomized double-blind phase 3 study to show these significant long-term benefits, both PFS and OS, for a PD-L1 inhibitor plus chemo across both squamous and non-squamous NSCLC within a single trial.
So broad applicability demonstrated in one go.
Exactly. That broad applicability across the major NSCLC types is a key distinction.
And we're already seeing this translate into real-world use, aren't we? You mentioned the approvals.
We are. Sugemalimab plus chemotherapy got approved in China back in 2021. Then more recently, it received approval in the EU in July 2024 and in the UK in October 2024.
That's a pretty quick journey from trial results to becoming an available option for patients globally.
It is, and those approvals really underscore that regulatory bodies are seeing it as a globally relevant first-line treatment option.
Now, as with any study, we should touch on limitations. What did the authors note?
Right, important to be balanced. The main limitation discussed is that the trial participation was limited to patients in China.
Okay. Does that limit how applicable it is elsewhere?
Well, the source makes a strong argument against that being a major limitation. They state that the actual disease characteristics, the clinical practices, the treatment guidelines for this type of NSCLC are generally consistent between East Asian and global populations.
I see.
And critically, they point out that race hasn't really been shown to be a major factor in determining how well patients respond to these PD-1 or PD-L1 inhibitors. Plus, as we just discussed, the subsequent international approvals really do support its global relevance.
Fair point. Any other limitations mentioned?
Yes. One other point was about treatment after the trial. The rate at which patients in the placebo group crossed over to get immunotherapy later on was a bit lower than in some other big trials, like the Keynote studies.
Could that artificially inflate the survival difference seen in Gemstone 302?
It's a valid question to ask. However, the authors point out that the overall percentage of placebo patients who did receive some form of subsequent immunotherapy later was actually similar to, or maybe even higher than, what was seen in other trials where crossover wasn't formally allowed.
Okay.
So their argument is that the survival benefit observed for Sugemalimab was real and sustained, and not just an artifact of the placebo group getting less access to effective later-line treatments compared to other trials.
Right. So even considering those points, the findings seem pretty robust and definitely valuable for guiding treatment decisions.
I think that's fair to say yes.
Yeah.
The data appears quite strong.
So let's try and sum this all up. The bottom line seems to be that Sugemalimab, when combined with chemotherapy, looks like a significant long-term step forward for the first-line treatment of metastatic non-small cell lung cancer.
I agree. It's showing durable benefits, lasting improvements.
And crucially, that includes patient groups that were previously very difficult to treat effectively, all while having a safety profile that seems manageable for long-term use. It really feels like it could redefine what's possible for some patients facing this diagnosis.
It really could. And, this kind of progress, it raises a bigger, perhaps more provocative question for the future, doesn't it?
What's that?
Well, as we continue to get better at this, refining these therapies, combining them, maybe even sequencing them more intelligently, how will the very concept of long-term survival keep changing? How much further can we extend it and redefine it for patients facing complex diseases like NSCLC?
That's a really powerful thought to end on, redefining long-term survival itself. It certainly gives us immense hope. We really encourage you, our listeners, to continue your own exploration and stay curious about these advancements. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.